Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Deborah Garlick from Henpicked Menopause in the Workplace and Menstruation Friendly. And today's session is Menopause and Mindset. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to introduce Professor Mary Ann Lumsden, who is an honourable professor at the Medical Education and Gynaecology at the University of Glasgow. And you retired, of course, Mary, because of your commitments under the CEO as CEO of the International Federation of Ops and Gynae, and so much more. I could read your biog for the whole of this half hour. You've been so passionate and in the space of menopause for decades now, and no doubt you will have seen lots of different changes going on during that time too. So it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you today, and thank you very much for joining us. And this session is all about menopause and mindset. Now, we nearly didn't turn the recording on or let anybody in because we always end up talking about this for a very long time, don't we, Mary?
We do. We have spent many happy hours talking about menopause, and I think I said on one occasion that I can talk about it all day.
Absolutely. Well, we've only got half an hour, and welcome to everybody from the Henpicked community as well. Do please tell us your thoughts, your questions, your experience of menopause and mindset, because of course the question that we posed was, does mindset affect menopause, and how does menopause affect mindset? Now, Mary, I know I shared with you that when we launched the very first Menopause in the Workplace conference in the world, that the BBC thought it was so novel that what they did is parked a journalist outside and said to passers-by, what's the first word that comes to mind when we say the word menopause? And we heard some really shocking comments. Old, painful, past it, hot flushes, moody, all of the negative stereotypes around menopause. And that was a reflection of where we were back in 2016. Hopefully things have changed, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of change. But when you hear those words, you can really understand why people might say, yeah, I don't know what's coming up. I'm a little bit worried about this. And maybe even not want to share that they're menopausal because of what people might think.
Yes, I think it's quite complicated because I think a lot of people still are quite frightened of menopause, and are anxious about what is going to happen to them. And some are terrified, as you've just outlined, and that hasn't changed. However, I think what has changed is that there is a lot more information out there. And I think many of us have tried very hard to educate people about menopause, because let's face it, if you live long enough, you will go through the menopause as a woman. And so it is something that we've got to get right so that everybody, probably from quite a young age, because their mothers and grandmothers will be going through menopause, knows what it is, the cessation of ovarian function, and then can start understanding symptoms and what it means and how likely are we to have problems, and then what we can do about it.
Absolutely. So I know when I came to menopause, quite frankly, I felt completely out of control and I found myself in a downward spiral. And if I'd have heard those words, or if you'd have even said to me, you might be experiencing the menopause, I would have been horrified. I was 45 years old and, I would have thought, it was a lot older than I was. So yes, we are starting to break through. But when it comes to our mindset and how we come to menopause, and we would never in any way suggest that symptoms are in the mind, but can your mindset make your menopause worse?
Oh, yes, there's no doubt mindset can affect menopause. I think thinking about mindset, which I have very much in the last few days, I mean, it's your prejudices, your beliefs, your fears, and your knowledge about things. And so if somebody comes to the menopause saying, I'm going to sail through it. That will be different from somebody who is terrified of the prospect. And they will respond differently and will respond differently to symptoms. People, I'm afraid, don't know how bad their symptoms are going to be. And we can't really predict it except in certain groups. And I think that's a detail we don't need to worry too much about at the moment. But it's very difficult to predict. And a majority of women cope. Others really, really, really need help. But everybody needs to understand what is going on.
Absolutely. So the more you understand menopause and what, I mean, I always find it alarming when people say, you never know what you're going to get. And we do know that there are some people like those that are experiencing surgical menopause or induced menopause may have more problematic journeys. But knowledge is power in this space, isn't it? If you know what to look out for and you know what to do, you can avoid the tragedy that I had with the downward spiral I found myself in.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting point because if you have an induced menopause, particularly at an early age, you should be warned by the person inducing it that you will have symptoms, almost certainly, and they may be quite bad. This is what we'll do about it. And so your approach is completely different than somebody who goes through a natural menopause, particularly at an early age, because often people don't suspect it. You're anxious, you may be a bit low, your periods are all over the place. And it's amazing how rarely people suspect it. And then with the premature ovarian insufficiency group, it's a bigger problem. It takes ages to diagnose.
It's a bigger problem. And, for women, and I know people I've spoken to, one woman in particular, that her story really resonated with me. And this was probably about 8-9 years ago. And she was in her 20s when she experienced, she'd had the first child. She didn't know that she was experiencing the menopause until she tried for the second. And for her view was, none of my peer group understand me. I am completely alone. And actually that can affect your mindset, can't it? Because and I know the Henpicked community is a wonderful community, and I love the supportive comments everybody puts in, but you're not alone, and community is important.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think with the very young, it often takes longer to make the diagnosis, and the implication is completely different because of fertility. And so one has to approach it in a rather different way. And also treatment, because somebody is very young, I don't want to take HRT, that's what my mother takes, sort of thing. And it takes a lot of work. But there are one or two very, very good groups that will support people with premature ovarian insufficiency. For example, Daisy Network, which is there to try and help people reset their mindsets. And although for some it's not easy, it is an important thing that we as professionals try and help people to maybe modify the mindset if it will help them to cope with their problems. Or one shouldn't say problems, with the issues that they're experiencing.
With the absolutely. So fearing it is can actually make it more of a problematic journey. And
Oh, gosh.
that's the stress, that's the cortisol that you're releasing, that's the hiding mechanisms. And I love the research that was done by Dr. Myra Hunter at King's College that resulted in talking about menopause can actually help alleviate your symptoms.
Oh,
Who'd have thought?
definitely.
And I can see in the chat people saying, I talk about this openly, I'll talk about this, or my husband and I went through our menopause experience together. That is amazing.
And it's really gradually happened. When I was at the University of Glasgow several years ago, I did some education sessions for staff, just general staff. And we had the males and females together, which was very novel, because my feeling was that the men needed to understand as much as the women. And so I think that has changed. And I think if the family can understand what's going on. It makes such a difference, but it does with everything, you know.
It does.
Every,
Everything, absolutely. And it was interesting when we were talking about the stereotypes. The comment that came up in chat was actually that's still a stereotype for some men. But actually, we are in a much more inclusive environment. I was at the House of Commons yesterday and we were talking a lot about this isn't 51% of the population that's affected. 51% is affected firsthand, but
yes.
everybody else through their relationships
Mm.
and involving people is really important so that they can, let's be fair, many of us aren't always good at asking for help.
I think that is undoubtedly true. And I think this is where one has to get over the idea that talking about it or asking advice is helping you to resolve things for yourself as much as asking for help. I've not put that very well. I don't know if you know what I mean, but I think sometimes if you have an iterative conversation with people, they don't feel help, I need help, you will give me help. It's more a discussion.
It's more a discussion, and it's lovely to see these chats in here saying I've got lovely supportive colleagues at work.
Yeah, yeah.
So actually that does ask for help. So, and it could be you could play a vital role for somebody else's menopause. And one of the comments came up saying, I didn't realize I was experiencing perimenopause until somebody at work took me to one side and said, do you think it might be something like this?
Yeah, yeah. And I think if people are in a way at an appropriate age and stage, that's absolutely fine. And little strategies can be suggested, as I have done with colleagues over the years, of trying to help relieve particularly things like hot flushes and so on in the workplace, and then mood changes. It's often quite possible to help them without anything very dramatic. And then if things are obviously not going in the right direction, then to get some professional help.
I'm going to come on to that because I've seen too many comments already in chat that says I'm not getting the help from my GP. So we'll do that in some practical tips. Because we've explored how mindset can affect menopause. How can menopause affect our mindset?
Well, I think it's partly through, well, there are a number of ways, but it's partly through the expectation. And so the concept of menopause affects people's mindset. And I think there is still this thing, end of fertility, moving into the next phase of life, sort of definitely post-reproductive phase of life. So there are the sort of evolutionary aspects, if you like. And then there are significant hormone changes. And I think we all have to accept that there are a lot of receptors for estrogen and progesterone in the brain. And so it's bound to happen. If you think of what your mindset is like when you're pregnant and how you think, or you don't think quite often, one's whole response to everything is different, and it's partly due to your hormones. It's largely due to your hormones. And I think this happens all the way through life, that hormones are very important to us. And whether and replacing them or adding back hormones at the menopause, there's nothing wrong in that. If it helps people to be productive and happy and live a positive life, what's wrong in that?
Absolutely. So I'll say to everybody, what do you find? How I can see some lovely comments coming through here around what helped you and what could you do to help somebody else? Because when it comes to the practical top tips, and I did share mine, I felt completely out of control, but that's because the word perimenopause was unheard of back
Yeah.
in back 15 years ago. So it was absolutely unheard of. So my whole mindset would have been, I can't be that old. I still go out clubbing. What do you mean? Might be the menopause. I would have been horrified. But actually now I know more. And I would say for everybody, first of all, there's a bit of an acknowledgement. Menopause isn't for old ladies. It's actually towards the middle of our lives, not towards the end of our lives. I think if anybody says, what does a 50-year-old, 60-year-old woman, we are very different to our grandmas. And so, there is that acknowledgement and the appreciation that this is a stage in our lives, as you said right at the beginning, we'll all experience it if we live long enough. But actually, knowledge is power. Read up from trusted sources. And I know, Mary, you've got lots of trusted sources. Google's not always your best friend on this one.
Take care with Google. I periodically look through it out of interest to see what's there. And I think that what it can do is sort of raise an awareness of what might be important issues. But there are some very good websites. I mean, for example, the Women's Health Concern, which is the patient arm of the British Menopause Society, has a lot of information. And the Hormone Health website is increasing the information it has on it. And there will be websites which should be reasonably sensible. Not promise you the world, maybe, but they will be sensible. But can I go back just to this problem with getting access to GPs?
Yes.
Is a really, really major issue. And it goes on and on and on. And if anything, it's getting worse. And so I think we are going to have to try and develop strategies to get round this. I think if people have a greater awareness and greater knowledge and can have a quick consultation with a GP and get whatever they want from it, that might be helpful, but they need to be forewarned and forearmed so that they know exactly what to ask and what to say.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing some comments coming up in chat saying, I've got an amazing GP and I finally seeing a great gynecologist after a GP referral. I paid privately in the end. Some of us do. Actually, I had to go down that route too. But you're right in that raising awareness and understanding. So people have got it in their mind and may look at some of the big websites, but actually, from the perspective of the top tips when you're talking to your GP, I'm giving people homework, going with prep. Keep a diary, understand what your symptoms look like. I have to say, I found that quite a sanity one because I was probably in the downward spiral of, oh my goodness, I'm never going to, I just can't cope. I didn't know what was going on. I felt out of control. But probably keeping that diary helps you understand that for me, triggers. A bad night's sleep means brain fog's going to be big.
Well, it does, but that happens anyway. Bad sleep is pivotal in menopause. And I think that's one of the most significant symptoms because it affects so many aspects of your life, maybe resulting from hot flushes, or it may be resulting from other life events which are really distressing you at the time, or, there may be other reasons for it, but it needs to be carefully addressed and not just take these sleeping pills.
Absolutely. No, it's the foundation of good health, isn't it? But if you're keeping that diary and you can identify some things that are triggers, somebody was saying to me yesterday, because I can have a cup of coffee before I go to bed, never affects me. But some people say, oh my gosh, I suddenly realized just making some tweaks to when I have caffeine. Well, to me, it's just like drinking chocolate, doesn't make any difference. But to others, they'll say, I'm like a zombie and my eyes just won't close if I've had caffeine beyond midday. But keeping a diary is almost like helping you understand yourself first. And that reading up also enables you to think about what you might want to do for yourself. Do you want to try HRT? Are you looking at your diary? All of that.
I think that this is important. I think I sort of term it taking control of your health. And this is all encompassing. One, it needs, finding out about whatever you're interested in at the time, and this is menopause. What can be done about it, and what can be done to change your lifestyle? And I think you hit upon things like caffeine, not having a hot curry at 9:30 at night sort of thing. And there'll be various obvious things. And for some, it would be maybe some weight loss, different diet. And I noticed HRT with magnesium pings up, if that makes it more effective to help you sleep. A lot of people take magnesium also for restless legs and all the other things. So yeah, all these things are good.
All those things are good, absolutely. And some people say alcohol. So many of my friends don't join me in their gin and tonic because they'll say, do you know what? It's not worth my hot flushes. I'm going to get just not worth it anymore.
Yeah.
But you know, that practical tips, diary, reading up. And one of the things that I've found works really, really well, and this is a top tip, which people have told me has worked so many times, is if you do that structure. What are your symptoms? How are they affecting you? What have you read up on? What might you like to try? You can structure a different conversation with your doctor that is, I think I'm experiencing the menopause. These are my symptoms, track your period, etc. This is what I've been reading up about. What do you think based on my medical history?
I think it's worth, the medical history can be very important when you're looking at things, you know, like HRT or any other treatments for menopausal symptoms. If there are possible reasons why it may not be advisable, people must see their doctors properly and try and get to somebody who knows what they're doing. Because otherwise you do see people who've been advised in a rather unusual way, shall we put it like that, but purely because the person advising them wasn't really clear. So if somebody has a chronic, you know, disease or chronic condition, should I say, of any sort, it is worth seeing a healthcare professional. Now, I think one can also go beyond doctors. In all big clinics, there will be other healthcare professionals who know quite a bit about it. And if they can't give the answer, a WhatsApp pings round. And I had one yesterday from somebody who wasn't sure about something. You know, we WhatsApp round the group. What do you think about this? And I think it's all good, and it stops a particular mindset in us as well.
Absolutely. So when you're making your appointment, when you've done your prep, the first thing I always say is ask who in the practice is the best person to talk to about menopause. Might actually be the practice nurse. Might not be a usual GP.
I think often.
But that's the sort of the real crux of that. So that is really something, if you like, as a remedy for. And sometimes you do have to be persistent.
You do, and it really distresses me, having worked in the NHS in Glasgow for 35 years, and I had a huge menopause clinic. That, you know, people can't get access. And we had quite a waiting list, but it wasn't inordinately long.
No.
And so we were able to provide a very good service. And I think they still do try their best to do so, but it has been very difficult. But, you know, going to see people privately is expensive, and it is beyond the reach of a lot of people.
Absolutely. Well, you know, we're here for anyone, everyone. But for some people,
really,
it's really absolutely essential. Interesting comment in here around not all that ails us is menopause. And I know this is something that you've talked about before, because somebody's saying, oh, you know, I thought it could be the menopause, but it turned out to be something else. So that's worth appreciating as well. And as you said, other things that's going on in our lives.
Oh, very much so. And it can be a difficult time. You can have, you know, family problems which cause enormous distress and keep you awake at night and so on. But I think the medical side of things, if I prescribe HRT, for example, for hot flushing, where it has a very, very high chance of working, if it doesn't, I need to know why. And so you will think through a whole range of things. But sometimes the cause is different, and we need to keep our open mind as to, and I think this is particularly true with some of the low mood, mental health symptoms, if you like. We need to keep an open mind. For some people, hormones are absolutely brilliant. For others, they're not. And we have to look at the whole woman.
You're talking really about a menopause menu, aren't you? You're sort of the what helps you, because a lovely comment here from Amanda. I stop caffeine in the afternoon, use relaxation techniques and herbal remedies, and manage to sleep most of the night now. I've been on a long journey and I'm finally winning.
Good.
So
taking control of your health. That's
taking control of your health, isn't it? And another one that was saying that her doctor, she went to her doctor and her doctor said, oh, prescribed antidepressants. She says, I've never had antidepressants. I knew it wasn't that. And she pushed it, and it was the menopause.
Absolutely. And it's a common thing that people are prescribed antidepressant. I think some GPs are more comfortable with antidepressants than they are with hormones, and this is why they do it. But unless you are clinically depressed, antidepressants won't help. And a lot of those going through menopause have low mood, but they're not clinically depressed. And it's a sort of, I suppose, a degree of severity and long psychiatric definitions, but it's a different thing. And antidepressants will not help. And one or two of the antidepressants can bring some relief to vasomotor symptoms, but low dose and too low to help the mood.
Absolutely.
So it's antidepressants I actually rarely prescribe. Very rarely.
Really? Okay, I've got one here for you about HRT. Trialing different HRTs for 4 years now. And this is an interesting one because there are so many different options available now. And I've heard this a couple of times, so thank you for putting this question in. Trialing different HRTs for 4 years now under Chelsea and Westminster. They now say estrogen at the right level, but still got symptoms.
Well, it will depend a little bit what the symptoms are. If the estrogen is at the right level, that's a tremendous start. If the symptoms are still ongoing and we would have expected them to respond to the HRT, I would be looking elsewhere for other things. I know a number of other people do disagree with me, but I think if you've got a decent level of estrogen and it's being absorbed into the body or through the gut, however you're taking it, then just giving more won't necessarily help. One needs to get to the root of the problem. And this takes longer and a lot of discussion quite often.
It's worth it though, isn't it? Because if you find the right formula for you, because I know I've had 4 different ones, and the one I've got now is okay. If I probably had a little bit more time, I might sort of vary it a little bit. But it's okay, it manages. But I can see a few people are saying, actually, I've tried different types. That one about absorbing is an interesting one because we're seeing a lot of people saying the gel is best. And I had a woman the other day saying, I just don't want to take the tablets because of all of the risks.
Well, the risks, if you are 65, have a BMI of 30, a body mass index, i.e. you're grossly overweight, and i.e. you are at high risk of having a clot in a vein, then I wouldn't prescribe tablets either. However, if you are, as many women are, around 45 to 50, reasonably fit, no adverse past history, there's a tiny increase in the risk of a DVT, but it's minute, and certainly less than with the oral contraceptive pill, which many will have taken. And so you can try and reassure them. But this is the perceived wisdom. I use a lot of gel and patches, I agree. But there are times when you say, look, this isn't working for you. It's not working for you.
Yeah, and somebody's saying it's the inconsistent advice on this one. But then, you put a lot of caveats on there. If you're over 30 BMI, if you're over 65, other than that, the tablets could work.
They might well do. I mean, I would look at somebody very carefully, because if they do have a DVT, it's not good. But DVT is rarer than you would believe from the sort of discussions that go on. And I think gel is absolutely wonderful when it works. But some people don't absorb it, and for others, it just isn't quite the right thing.
Okay, somebody said I'm a super absorber. It was just too strong. We
Well,
are all.
really.
It actually finishes our conversation or rounds off our conversation in what I would say is we are all unique
Mm,
in our journey.
mm, mm,
We can take control. For some of us, it takes a little bit longer, and for me, it was entirely due to ignorance of the subject at the time. But the more we know about it, the more we can prepare, the more we can talk about it. And I absolutely love the comments in the chat saying supporting each other, the support people are getting, because community can make a huge difference. Having people around us to talk, even if it's not to fix anything, even if
mm.
it's sometimes just to be able to say, do you know what, I'm having a day, and not feel judged. That's important too. So
Yes.
thank you very much, everyone, for all of the chat. And
Mm.
thank you very much, Professor Mary Ann Lumsden. I'm sure we could go on for another hour, and I think we're just about running over. But it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you again. And thank you very much, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Thank you.